Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani, and welcome back to this YouTube channel on all kinds of things related to narcissism and narcissistic relationships. I know that many of you have wanted a little bit more content on parenting, and this video actually not only addresses what many people who are co-parenting with a narcissist wants to know, but for any of you who had a narcissistic parent, this might also give you some information that will help you sort of think through these narcissistic relationships you're in, whether you grew up in one or you're trying to raise a child now in one. What I'm going to be doing together in this video is bringing together about all the information on all those different narcissistic subtypes, grandiose, covert, malignant, and talk about how those directly impact parenting, both if you're co-parenting and if you grew up like this. So let's take this on, okay? Now, I know, and we already have a series on this if you want to go back. It's quite a long series, like a 10 to 12 episode series. I've talked about the different subtypes of narcissism on this channel. Grandiose, covert, malignant, etc., etc. And these different types, these different narcissistic types, they present in different ways in different circumstances. And one of those circumstances, and it's probably where it's almost most profoundly felt, is parenting. Because this pattern of narcissism can be a little bit varied, for example, a malignant narcissist is a very, very different parenting experience for the child or a co-parent than would be a communal narcissist. It can often mean that survivors of different patterns of narcissistic abuse may also be having different experiences, and why maybe your story is not the same as someone else who had a narcissistic parent. So much of the content and the material on narcissism out there often really focuses on the baseline grandiose narcissist, and that's fine, but it misses the boat on other people's experiences, and it can be quite frustrating if you are trying to co-parent with a covert narcissist, or your parent is a covert narcissist, and what you are reading doesn't fully capture your experience. You're already confused enough. You don't want the content to be confusing as well. As you already know, the core of narcissism remains the same for all of the narcissistic types, right? The core of narcissism, the lack of empathy, the entitlement, the grandiosity, the inability to manage frustration or disappointment, the validation seeking, the arrogance, and the egocentricity, as well as the core insecurity of these folks. But the ways that these things, that these patterns are expressed and experienced can vary based on the narcissistic type. Now, we know that parenting is a core relationship. It's probably one of the most core relationships, right? It shapes the psychological development of a human being. And if you are co-parenting with a narcissist, knowing the specific challenges you may encounter based on sort of the narcissistic type of your partner can help you understand what you are up against, or understand perhaps as an adult what your experience was as a child with a parent and maybe continues to be with that parent as an adult. So let's start at the top. Yeah, it's where everyone else starts, so we might as well start there, the grandiose narcissist. You know what they are: grandiose and larger than life and attention seeking and arrogant and selfish. Let's face it, the grandiose narcissists are the ones who care a lot more about how things look than how they actually are. Parenting for a grandiose narcissist, when a grandiose narcissist becomes a parent, it's about putting on a show, right? Like, look at us, and I've got these great kids, and on and on and on. In public, they may actually really try to look like devoted parents and talk about their kids and the pictures and the whole 9 yards. But in private, they're actually really not interested in the day-to-day slog of being a parent. They may be the proverbial Disneyland parent. They're there for the big days, and they may also, though, push children to an excessive degree to be good at something that makes the parent look good. Be good at sports, be good at school, be good at performing, whatever matters to the parent, and may actually disconnect from the child when the child is not succeeding as they want them to, or is being the person they want them to, right? The child is like an extension of the narcissistic parent. The grandiose narcissistic parent needs to be liked, and so they will do what they need to do to be liked. But they also don't tolerate frustration well. So they may get quite angry and have a short fuse with, what is the inherent ups and downs of parenting. They may also foist a lot of the unpleasant parenting duties on the other parent so they can stay as the well-liked parent. Now, if you had a grandiose narcissistic parent, you knew then and now it was all about them all the time. And to this day, as an adult, having been raised with that kind of parent, you may still be vulnerable to pushing your own needs away and attending to the more demanding people who are in your midst. If you are co-parenting with a grandiose narcissistic parent, it can be jarring and maddening to watch them make parenting all about them. And they'll talk a tough game about what a terrific parent they are and how much they love their kids, but actually really not be up to the drudgerous demands of what parenting really is. And with a grandiose narcissist in the post-divorce period, they may be into the kids when it works for them. But for example, when they want to start dating and want to start living their new best life, be prepared that they may view your children as a little bit of an inconvenience in their new life and will variably embrace them and put them on display based on the function the children are serving for them. And you'll still find yourself having the less pleasant jobs of having to be the homework police and all of that. Now, with the malignant narcissist, this is a whole different game. Malignant narcissists are much more menacing. They can also be quite exploitative, more manipulative, more prone to lying, and may even be almost paranoid or even sadistic in the kinds of actions they engage in. A divorce from a malignant narcissist can often be really unsettling. Malignant narcissists can also be quite cold as parents, almost kind of scary parents, and children may actually be quite a bit more anxious with them. In this form of narcissism, we will see that these are parents that are often more concerned with power, control, and dominance, and will bring these expectations and these styles into parenting. In fact, the malignant narcissistic parent may not be that interested in being a parent, but may be more apt to attempt to use the courts and processes of custody and all this stuff to punish you by manipulating custody and financial arrangements, and just keep playing games with that, but constantly adjusting and drawing you back in to sort of courtroom situations. If you were raised by a malignant narcissist, you may still experience symptoms that feel more in line with post-traumatic stress as an adult, and you may still feel quite activated, triggered, and on edge, and may still find it difficult to feel safe in adult relationships or have chosen adult relationships that aren't safe. If you are trying to co-parent with a malignant narcissist, I can tell you right now, you are exhausted. You are exhausted by what was very likely a terrifying divorce process. You're exhausted and fearful of leaving the children with their co-parent, since malignant narcissists can often be quite impulsive and careless. So they may not lock things properly or make things that are fully safe for the children. You may be fearful of the menace and the threats that they still hold over you. And you may remain concerned that because you may still have contact with the malignant narcissist through the children, how much more psychological harm they can continue to enact. The covert narcissist, which is a style and a subtype many of you are familiar with, are characterized by a more vulnerable and victimized style. They do often present as victims, feeling like life never goes their way, nothing they wanted ever happens, people are out to get them, that they deserve so much more from life. As parents, they will often remain sullen victims And they may share this victimhood, inappropriately so, with children who may struggle with confusion and guilt about how they can step in and help or rescue their parent who sort of feels like such a victim, right? The child doesn't understand that they just want to help the parent. They want to help their covert narcissistic parent feel better. If you were raised by a covert narcissistic parent, you may still vacillate between guilt and anger, which makes sense because the covert narcissist is so prone to this sort of victimized identity. You may have felt as a kid, you often had to rescue them, but also feel anger because of how much parenting was always about them, not the children, about the parent. And they would talk about, oh, parenting takes such a toll on me, and nobody in this household ever appreciates me enough, and everyone out there has it so much easier than me as a parent. If you are co-parenting with a covert narcissist, it feels like having another child, like actually having a very sullen, angry adolescent child. They will at times be victimized and sullen, and you'll feel like you have to babysit them to prepare them for watching their children. You had to get them completely ready, and they may not be able to manage the demands of children because they feel so victimized and put upon. And then the covert narcissist may alternate between getting really rageful and angry at the children and then feeling sorry for themselves, saying, I'm doing the best that I can and nobody is supporting me. That's a very common stance in the covert narcissistic parent. And then, in other words, the kids often feel the need to rescue that parent. What about the communal narcissists? Well, communal narcissists are the folks, as you now know, they're the ones who derive their validation from doing charitable deeds or good deeds. These are people who often want to be viewed as humanitarians or as saviors, and will often want to be on center stage or get validation via social media for all the good things they do for other people. Look at me, I'm a rescuer, and they're often looking real good while they rescue. However, all that charitable do-gooderness seems to fade behind closed doors when they're with their family. And while they may be enraptured with helping children on the other side of the globe, or children that are not related to them through their charitable endeavors, they may actually be quite disengaged from their own children. They may want to put their parentness on display for a photo op, which makes them look like, look at me, I rescue people and I am a parent, but they really don't want to do the work of parenting. And they will, though, want to get the validation of being this really publicly involved parent. Your child may wonder why their parent is bringing their A game to other people and to other children, and the entire family system may actually start to burn out on hearing how lucky you are to have such a community-oriented person as part of their family. If you were raised by a communal narcissist, you are well acquainted with the alternate universe in which you were raised. A world in which everyone told you how wonderful your parent is and how much they support the community and how much good they've done. And yet, behind closed doors, you had to endure your parents' lack of empathy and disconnection. There can be a lingering sense, if you're raised by a communal narcissistic parent, of feeling like you're not enough, or maybe even just plain confused, since your parent was able to bring their best to other people. If you are co-parenting with a communal narcissist, it will sometimes mean working around their so-called schedule of being a great person, and they may want the children on demand to help them look good at events and on camera and in pictures and in front of other people. But maybe the communal narcissistic co-parent may be less engaged at times when the children aren't actually as useful to their portrayal of themselves as a savior, and in fact may be always asking for workarounds regarding custody and all of that, so they can focus on their important work for other people, with the entitled expectation of the communal narcissist being that everyone should support their important world-changing work, including you, their ex-partner, and make your schedule, and then by making that, make your schedule work around theirs. Now, the neglectful narcissists are those who literally almost don't engage with people in their world unless they need something from them, and in that way can feel very manipulative. Neglectful narcissists view people as conveniences, as a bridge to get something done, and a neglectful narcissist will sort of access other people when it works for them. A person who's a neglectful narcissist will often view children as a major inconvenience, and as such, the neglectful narcissistic parent may be very disengaged, very disinterested, and very remote. This can be very challenging for a child who is often trying to garner the parent's attention. And this can, over time, impact a child's sense of worth, as the child may feel as though they are not worthy of their parent's attention because the parent is so inattentive. If you were raised by a neglectful, narcissistic parent, it was, honestly, is probably destabilizing, because these are often very cold, distant, detached, remote parents with little interest in parenting or in other people, unless those other people are completely aligned with what they need and want. If your interests, for some reason, might have coincided with your neglectful narcissistic parents' interests, then they might actually have been interested in you for a minute. But then will go ahead and start doing them on their own. So the best way I could portray it is that you were the child with the baseball glove, waiting forever for the parent to show up and throw the ball, just like you thought parents were supposed to do, and they never did. This can be a difficult setup going into adulthood, a sense of not enoughness, a feeling that you have to jump through hoops to get the attention of other people, of having to win this kind of parent over. In fact, you might find that as a child, you actually took on hobbies or interests that the neglectful narcissistic parent had just to get them to spend a little time with you. If you are co-parenting with a neglectful narcissist, the harder work that you face as a co-parent may be in helping your children through the crisis of wondering why their parent has relatively limited interest in them. In fact, a neglectful narcissistic parent may just cut bait and leave you with the kids full time. And you have to carefully help your child not to internalize the sense that they're not enough. Not to mention your healing, your own healing from a marriage spent with someone who barely knew that you existed. It's as though you were just like an unwatered plant in that marriage. The self-righteous narcissists are the ones who derive their narcissistic validation and supply by sort of holding themselves up as a morally superior person, and will be more focused on doing things just so rather than from a more flexible place of the heart, which is what you need with kids. Everything can't just go off on militaristic precision. Self-righteous narcissists can actually be a bit confusing because they often look quite loyal. They may be, for example, the pillars of a religious community, following the religious edicts to the letter of the law. They may be really into following rules. They may have a very black and white sense of right and wrong. This type of narcissistic pattern, we can also see these are folks who are very judgmental, and they can be critical of other people. They criticize everything. They could criticize other people's work ethic. They criticize their lifestyles. They criticize their jobs. They criticize their houses. They criticize their behaviors. There's a tremendous rigidity to them. And all of us feel like a 10-year-old child in the face of their scoldy, judgmental, and rigid ways of being. For a child, this is a very strict and limiting childhood in many cases. Self-righteous parents are often quite rigid, punitive, judgmental, and the child is raised with a strong sense of conditionality, a sense of that you have to follow the rules to be loved. Self-righteous narcissistic parents are often quite authoritarian as well. Children raised like this often believe that this kind of parent values the rules of order more than they actually value the child. And into adulthood, that kind of rigid, cold, and choosing morality over love and being there for your child can result in some self-devaluation. If you had this kind of parent, you had what might have felt like more of a militaristic or ridiculously strict and judgmental childhood. Self-righteous narcissists, even when they have plenty of money, can be very, very cheap, miserly. And while there is some virtue, I strongly believe in the virtue of developing a work ethic and a child having a small job to make some money of their own, the cheapness of the self-righteous narcissist often meant an inefficiency that was unnecessary. And when they could have helped family members and their own children with their goals or lightened some of the stress in that, and they could have done it easily, they would often wield money in a very punitive way. Having a parent like this can often result in lots of self-judgment going into childhood. In the worst case, if you have this kind of parent, you might actually have been sort of infected by their rigid moral mantles and sort of keep staying to that rigidity. In some cases, we see extreme rebellion if you're raised by this kind of parent, to the point of harm, putting yourselves in risky situations and acting out. But in general, having a parent like this can fuel a person with a chronic feeling of the sense of shame and judgment trailing you wherever you go. If you are co-parenting with a self-righteous narcissist, be prepared for financial debates about the smallest things for the entire period of having minor children. They're often quite ritualized and obsessive around all kinds of details. And even if they don't really enjoy the kids, they will fight over the extra 3 hours of custody they are entitled to because one time traffic meant you got home a few hours late from a 3-day vacation, despite you not holding them to the same standard. So it can be maddening. Or self-righteous narcissists, if you have to do this with self-righteous narcissists, they will often be quite openly judgmental about some of the rhythms of your household. Your children may have to adjust to going back and forth between one home that's rather rigidly regimented to a fault, and then perhaps, if your home is healthier, to the more responsive rhythms of a healthier home. We also know that narcissism often also develops out of a cultural or generational dynamic. Perhaps parents who, for whatever, where they came from or what was happening when they were children, who endured trauma, or were from cultures characterized by authoritarianism, very, very sharply demarcated economic stratification from cultures that are very patriarchal and top-down and familial structures. These patterns may also sometimes be observed in members of a family who they themselves had or had parents who had also endured the tremendous stress of a difficult migration experience or a difficult refugee status or war or other unrest where they were living. These are sometimes families, from a cultural perspective, we can also see that families in which loyalty is everything, and it's almost a blind loyalty, difficult family members can often get enabled because of these cultural and his family historical issues. She's been through so much, that's why she's difficult, don't say anything. That sort of kind of a sequence. If you were raised by a parent with these kinds of histories behind them, these really difficult histories, you may have felt very hopeless and caught between two worlds, the culture in which you live and the culture of your family. You may have felt stifled or silenced by these patterns, but you may have also, and may still also, feel very guilty at pushing back, knowing your family or your parents' history, leaving you in a permanent sense of dissonance, knowing that they had gone through so much, you might have had an easier path. That explains some of their patterns, but you're still struggling, and even as an adult, struggling on how to fit your family into your life. If you are co-parenting with someone who has had this sort of generational or cultural issues contributing to their narcissistic style, you may have tried throughout the relationship, throughout the marriage, to attempt to understand their culture and the origins of these patterns, and may have even justified your partner's behavior to yourself and your children because of knowing what the family, their family or in-laws family had been through. And your former partner's family may have had very different conceptions of child rearing than you do. And you may also have different conceptions of child rearing than your in-laws. Your children may be actually quite confused by all of this and also feel guilty if they know about their family and their cultural history of that other parent. So it can also cause a tension in there. As you listen to this, you may think, my parent was actually more than one of these types. Or I had a parent with one type, and now I'm in a relationship or co-parenting with somebody who's narcissistic, and it's a different type. And that just means more challenges. And you may be facing the varied challenges of the varied types, which is actually quite taxing. Knowing these issues as I've laid them out in this video actually doesn't change anything in your circumstances per se. My hope is that understanding some of this can help you be better prepared for co-parenting challenges, not wasting time on communication strategies that won't and don't work, to maintain realistic expectations, and to recognize the psychological hurdles that you may continue to face as an adult as a result of being raised within these patterns. I hope this gives some clarity on how these subtypes work and how they may be differentially impacting you as a co-parent or as an adult who has a narcissistic parent. Thanks again. And also in the comments section, here's a thought. If you feel comfortable, you can even share like, yeah, I had a malignant narcissistic parent and now I'm married to someone who's a covert narcissist. It may be interesting for everyone in the comments section to sort of see how that's playing out for everyone else. Thanks again. For everyone else. Thanks again. For everyone else. Thanks again. For everyone else.